He's not a bat, he's a man who fights crime. And we're gonna watch him fight for a minute at a time. With John and Niall and a guest who doesn't rhyme. It's Bat Minutes!
Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Bat Minutes and Robin. This is the podcast where we try not to make a mess while we talk about each minute of Batman and Robin, 1 minute at a time. I am one of the hosts, Niall McGowan.
And I am your other host. For lovers, not fighters, I am John Parker.
Hey, and once again, we're joined for the final time this week by author, podcast host, academic, Dr. Anna F. Peppard, PhD.
Oh, I get on the start and the back.
I'm getting the whole thing. This is the special treatment now.
PhD.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, more than welcome. Today we're here to talk about minute 78, let's say 76, 78 of Batman and Robin, which begins with a fistful of pheromone, and it ends a minute later with an instant recovery. Like, just not even any kind of gap, just straight back to business again. So the thing is that we're talking about throwbacks and whatnot, in the other minutes there. And sure, the blatant one that's happening here is, of course, this little scenario the Batman's in where he's on the floor and been straddled by Poison Ivy. It's very much deliberately designed to be reminiscent of Catwoman being on top of Batman in Batman Returns, where she licked his face and all this business. And of course, he even kind of alludes to it, where he says, straight off the bat, like, why are all the beautiful ones homicidal maniacs? Is it me? It's supposed to be like a little, like, remember Catwoman, right? It's the same kind of deal,
I hated that line the first time. It's awful. It's a really bad line, because to me, this, how do I even put it? Well, let's look at the positives in a way, right? To me, this definitely says that there has been more time between movies than we thought. Because who else is he talking about?
I mean, he's got to be talking about Vicky Vale and Chase Meridian.
Yeah, it's confusing. It's confusing because, like, Catwoman, she wasn't a homicidal maniac, despite that line. No, she was not at all, unless we've got by Bruce and he's talking about Joker, Two-Face, or the Riddler, and they're the gorgeous homicidal maniacs.
It could be, but I think I would describe Catwoman as her whole thing. She wanted to kill Max Schreck, and she sliced the guy's face up and then poked his eyes out on that one scene.
Yeah, but a homicidal maniac, to me, says someone who sort of kills indiscriminately. She had a goal. She was taking down very specific people for specific reasons. Now, okay, maybe Bruce didn't know that, and he just thinks she's crazy. Okay, of course. Crazy women, But I wouldn't personally describe her as a homicidal maniac.
It kind of gets back to what we were talking about a couple minutes ago, in terms of a couple of episodes ago. When you were saying about, Mr. Freeze gets to be more sympathetic than Ivy in the movie because he is a homicidal maniac. He is indiscriminately going out there and just freezing countless people. Like, he's the one. And yet by the end of the movie, you're like, oh, but he wasn't so bad. And you're like, I mean, if we're going to compare crimes here.
Yeah. Like, what does Ivy actually do? Okay, her stated aim is to kill half the planet. Okay, whatever. But does she do that?
Oh, so it's not even half the planet, the full planet.
Well, no, that's... But she doesn't achieve any of that. Like, what does she actually achieve? She doesn't really kill innocents.
Oh, she kills the guy that,
There's a couple of them.
She kills the John Shea guy who tried to kill her. So, I mean, that's fair.
Which is perfectly justified because he's a jerk.
I think I'd say the more people, on the way there, they do mention, oh, yeah, she killed some guy, stole his limousine, killed a baggage person in the airport and stuff like that.
But that's not in the finished film.
Yeah. Oh, no, Gordon mentions it, so it's to be taken as canon.
Oh, no, that's true, actually. He does mention it. Yeah. I'm thinking of it. Because the cut scenes, you actually see it, don't you?
Yeah. But I think her whole thing is, she is full-blown, I am going to kill every person on Earth. And it's going to be me and Mr. Freeze. Like, that seems to be like, and she also attempts to kill Nora Freeze. She's flat out like, I'm pulling the plug on this lady.
Yeah, but my interpretation, Nora's already dead.
It's turned into the Poison Ivy apologist podcast.
I am very pro Ivy. She is one of my inspirations in life.
Aww.
So yes.
I'm just more intrigued by the idea, though, that it's like all the gorgeous ones are homicidal maniacs. So it's like, did Vicky Vale turn out to be a homicidal maniac too? Like, was there an in-between movie where it's like, oh yeah, she became like the Shutterbug or something, like some other supervillain where she went around blinding people with her camera and then bludgeoning them to death. And like, we spent so long last movie talking about how Chase Meridian was set up perfectly to be a villain. Like, she seemed like she was supposed to be the Batman answer to Harleen Quinzel, where it's like, she knows everything about this guy. She's a psychiatrist getting in his head. Shouldn't she be like, manipulating him and stuff? Like, everything about Tracy Meridian lends itself to be like, she could 100% become villainous because she's sexually obsessed with Batman, but also she has power over him because she can get in his head and stuff. But they never mentioned what happened to Chase. It's like, oh yeah, she also did become a homicidal maniac, and she is currently in Arkham Asylum. Where
that could have been a good twist. What if Chase became Ivy or something?
I took it to mean kind of like, and again, this might be giving the movie way too much credit, and Clooney, again, he's the problem with this movie, and he really doesn't sell this. But the idea that the women that he's legitimately attracted to are women like Ivy, who can kind of indulge his kinkness, whatever that is. And, because he's really not interested in that weird girlfriend that he has. But a woman like Ivy, perhaps.
That's a good take on it, actually. Yeah, like all the beautiful ones are homicidal maniacs because he's only attracted to the ones that are homicidal maniacs.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. He has no interest in his girlfriend in this.
None.
None
Although
whatsoever.
I do wish now, though, we had that scene previous where he saw like Riddler's outfit and Two-Face's outfit in the Arkham storage room. I wish they put that little, like, that Dream Warden thing in there too, to allude to the idea that Chase Meridian is also in Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah. She's like, oh, she went completely nuts. Like, oh, we don't talk about it. She's just out of his life.
If she'd gone nuts, he would have still liked her.
Oh, he would have liked her more.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's true. Should also say as well that this is kind of the closest the movie gets to a major thing that was in the comics that's just not touched upon really here, or now in modern comics, not at all, where Poison Ivy's whole thing originally was that she was obsessed with Batman. Like, she was into him. Like, that was the whole thing, where when she's first introduced, she wants to win Batman over and, like, make him like her, like, they'll be king and queen of the underworld, basically. Like, she wanted to sway him into being her mate, basically. It's such a hard thing for Batman. It lasted for years, even in Neil Gaiman's Pavon, which of course in 1989, they have a whole thing where they talk, like, she's talking to a psychiatrist and she's like, oh yeah, and then eventually I became really obsessed with Batman. And it shows a shot of her in her bedroom. She's got Batman posters up. She's wearing a Batman t-shirt. It's like she was a full-on Batman kind of fangirl. And even alluded to it in the Harley Quinn animated series, where I think someone's talking, like I have to try to track down what episode it is, but someone's saying like, oh yeah, going through your Batman phase. And Ivy gets very defensive with kind of like, well, I'll go through a Batman phase. I mean, we're all into Batman for a little bit. I mean, it's not a big deal. Like, what's the big deal about and stuff? And she's just clearly very embarrassed because it's alluding to, in the past, Poison Ivy's whole thing was like, yeah, she was just at the hots for Batman. That was why she did what she did. And I feel that because in every movie that they made thus far, they had Vicky Vale fell in love with Batman. That was the central point. Catwoman had her whole thing with Batman. Chase Meridian last movie, who of course was originally supposed to be Poison Ivy. Nicole Kidman was like in consideration for that role, and then they're like, well, we too many villains in it, so we got rid of Ivy. And she had a fetishistic obsession with Batman. It kind of feels then when they get to adapting Poison Ivy, it's like, she can't be into Batman. It's too much. We've done it too many times. We gotta get rid of that as a motive for her. And so that's why you get Bruce with, Beard Lady, and this one little bit where she's just trying to get, like, I just want to kill him, basically. And that the only way I know to do that is through seduction. I will say, though, in terms of all the poo-pooing we've been doing to Clooney this week and throughout the movie in general, I do get a chuckle out of his delivery of "oh no," and the way he just abruptly stands up. So again, it is very much like I've been in this exact scenario before, and I got my face licked, and I fell in love with a woman. I'm not going through that again. So.
I get a laugh out of the fact, we talked in the last episode about Poison Ivy's sort of awkward, but ultimately mostly graceful, like lean down on the sacks of whatever. And when Batman gets up, he kind of struggles up.
Yes.
He's just not capable of doing that as gracefully. I didn't know how intentional that was or not, but it made me laugh.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Was there any function to, like, I have it on a still right now where she's kind of like lounging in the bags with her legs very like splayed, and I like that. It's again some good physical acting.
Yeah, everything she does is amazing in this.
She is good. Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm all in on, like, she understood the assignment. It is giving it the best that she could possibly give it. But like, I'm hypnotized by the plant belt with like the leaf on it. And like, is that serve a purpose, or is it just style? Or
the purpose is to look cool.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I don't know about it as a style choice. I just like the rest of the costume is very sort of soft, and then it's got this big plastic belt on the front. I don't know how I feel about it.
You need a belt. You need a belt to break it up. I want that belt.
Fair enough.
Weirdly, that belt reminds me of like the Chameleon's belt in Spider-Man or something. I'm expecting it to press a little button. It's like, she turns into Catwoman, literally turns into her or something.
That would actually work.
I was thinking there would be some sort of device in it or something, but I don't think that ever happens in the movie, as I can recall.
No. I think if it was an active device, it would at least help us decipher whether she's naturally doing these things or if she actually has, like, the technological prowess to build things, to build pheromones and things like that. So, yeah, it does fit. I'm certain it's just there for style, but it's
Well, I've got another costume question. So, do you find it interesting at all that, given the emphasis on anatomically correct suits, in air quotes, and on the Batgirl costume too, we have very prominent nipples. It's interesting to me how smooth they made like Poison Ivy in this cat suit, because she does not have nipples in this costume, and that must have been a very deliberate choice, because if you were wearing a light green leotard, there would be a lot of that going on. So they have clearly like put like something under there to diminish it, and that seems like an odd choice given how much nipple there is in the rest of the film.
Well, I think it's literally like in this day and age, the way Instagram, for instance, if you show the female nipple, it's a no-no. If it's a male nipple, that's fine. They don't care. I think it's kind of like that. It's like even back then, maybe it's like we can show the bat nipple, but we can't show Uma's nipple.
Well, that's because Joel Schumacher does say that, like, he was in a quandary when it came to Batgirl, because she does have very subtle nipples on the suit, but he had to downplay them.
Yeah.
And right enough, if you look in the making of book, the concept art for Poison Ivy, beyond that one we were talking about last episode where she had literally had spike nipples, some of the concept art for her final outfits, her nipples are very pronounced.
Yeah.
So I feel there probably was like, oh yeah, that's going to be a thing. And then they were like, no, you can't do that.
But it's the sexualization of women and women's bodies over men's. Like, oh, you can have a man's nipple. That's fine. Nobody cares about that. Even though, of course, men like nipple play.
This being the 90s too, the era of Jennifer Aniston and her nipples through the sweaters and Friends and stuff. You think it would have flown, but I guess they were told, nope, too much. You can have the guy nipples, can't have the woman nipples.
Well, it's weird that this movie, because you think about what like audience this movie was pitched to, because it very much like was pitched to children. Like, I mean, this was like they were still like selling these movies to kids. So like, I mean, my suspicion would be like having her real nipples visible through that costume would be like too much of like a real body, and that like upsets people. Whereas you can have kind of the plastic nipples on the Batgirl costume because it's not her actual body, and this would be like a little bit more disruptive. But it's once again interesting, like seeing them trying to walk that line and like think like, whose gaze is this for? What audience is this for? Like what buttons can we push or what buttons can't we push?
Yeah, very true.
It's fascinating, thinking about their thought process. Because another thing, you talking about plastic, made me think of when Ivy says, I'm a lover, not a fighter. That's why every Poison Ivy action figure comes complete with him, pointing at Bane, which I think is the worst line of the film. Or it's a contender, at the very least. But it's also not true. I looked this up. The Ivy figures from this very film came solo.
There was an Ivy and Robin double pack. But yeah, no Ivy and Bane. There was a Bane and Batman. There was a Robin and Batman. And there was a Freeze and Batman. But yeah, ironically enough, the toy people were like, oh, we didn't think of that. I guess, yeah, her and her active psychic in the movie.
Not together.
Where he's all with her the whole time. Not in the...
If they were together in the toys, I think this line would be saved. It would actually be quite funny.
But like Uma Thurman going like, $8.99, available from all good toy
Why
shops.
not? Lean into it. This movie is to sell figures. Do it.
Yeah,
I did like, in theory, the line about referring to herself as an action figure that has like a little bit of potential, but yeah, it kind of falls apart in the second half. That's funny though with the toys, like, because the way that things are sold, and it's just like that made me think of like, these are the characters that you're supposed to play with together, and they come packaged that way because those are the ones that go together, and that's how you're supposed to, because the way the toys are sold obviously advertises the ways that you're supposed to use them. So that's interesting which ones are packaged with which other ones.
Yeah, it kind of opens up a whole can of worms too, in terms of like what culturally within the text, what are supervillains and superheroes like to people? Because we had a whole thing in the original script for Batman Returns. It had that Batman had been merchandised, and you could get Batman action figures and Batman sleds and things like that. And this version of, Batman now seems like he is a guy who's just like, yeah, sure, I'll host your flower ball, and you can make toys of me or whatever. It could be that they've also been doing like, oh, you can get like a Two-Face toy as well. Like, it's all the rage now that people have these crazy, colorful characters around Gotham. Because she could have landed in going like, they're going to make a toy out of me. So I'm well aware of what and my action figure will clearly have to come with Bane, because he's by my side all the goddamn time.
That's another instance, though, where this movie could kind of lean into the camp in a different and more productive way by being a little bit more self-reflexive. Because if it was this world had that bleed between its own movies and like the world, because that would be so cool, right? I mean, if it was like we had toys of the characters from the previous movie featured in this movie, and Bruce Wayne had to go to like some sort of event promoting them, that would be great. That would be a good joke.
That would work. Why not? Do it.
We kind of did it in that the Fantastic Four movie. I think at one point they come out with like, oh yeah, we have our toys, and they have a little thing of the thing going, it's clobbering time. Yeah. And Michael Chilkus has no time for it and stuff. But I'm an apologist of that movie. I actually really enjoyed the Tim story.
Well, you saying that as well, of course, as I've brought up, as a wrestling geek, CM Punk is now back in wrestling, and that he says it's clobbering time. He's always said it.
Oh, he's trying to. Oh, is he like? Oh, if you ever Marvel, understand your casting for Fantastic Four over there. So you ever need a straight edge thing?
Why not? Why not?
That's what he does on the rocks and everything.
When he comes out to the ring, the music's playing. He gets down on one knee. And he looks at his wrist like a watch is there, and he goes, it's clobbering time. Yeah.
Should say as well, actually, coincidentally this week on our listeners page, friend of the show, Neil Ricketson, recommended a new podcast called The Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, who was a guy who used to make toys back in like the 80s and 90s. And it was a whole episode about creating the toy line for Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. I was like, well, we're talking about toys this week, but Neil will be on later in the season talking much more about toys then, because that's his section. But a couple of interesting things I did find listening to that episode, where apparently Uma Thurman was very excited about having a toy, and she actually invited like the sculptor out to her house, and he sat with her for the entire day as she explained like the lines of her face and stuff. So I guess maybe because she used to be a model, she knows all about this stuff. So she was explaining exactly like the way her features curve and all this kind of thing, and like apparently sat in her bedroom for hours just taking notes about her face that she was giving herself and stuff. Okay. the thing is, then when you see the finished Poison Ivy toy, and even then in the show they show you a picture of it, and it's like, yeah, lots of things can go wrong in the process.
Oh.
So it could have been the mold or whatever, but like doesn't look a goddamn thing like Uma Thurman when it came out.
That's sad for her.
It's a really bland toy too. It's just like literally her in a green body stocking. Like it's the wrong color. It doesn't look like any outfit she has in the movie.
They didn't
And again,
care back then.
Within that episode, they really explains exactly what was going wrong with we've heard the Schumacher and many people involved in the film saying about how rushed everything was, and he's very like Iron Archer is talking about it, saying, yeah, it takes 14 months to get a toy to market. So when this film was greenlit to come out within 2 years, we were behind already. And so they were deliberate, like they were actually having the toy people sitting around in the art department offices waiting to have any kind of reference to design a toy around, and they just didn't have them because they're like, well, we were there waiting for stuff, but there was no art department because they were still hiring people, and so we were just literally having they're saying there's things in the movie like little globes and stuff like that. It's like, I designed that because I was just there. And I was like, I'm the toy guy, but I'm designing things for the movie because they need someone to do this stuff. And it's it was going on then about the various little bits he did. He'd help design like a Batgirl toy and stuff like that. And it really struck my eyes because he's going through like the Poison Ivy toys that he's a part of. And they have one called Evil Entrapment Ivy. And she's wearing a black body stocking with green patches of moss around it. And I'm like, that's the friggin' New 52 outfits.
Yeah.
That they brought back years later.
Oh my God.
They swiped it from the friggin' toy line of Batman and Robin.
Does that surprise you at this point? Everything's stolen from the Schumacher movies.
I just thought New 52 so cocky and it's like, look, we're doing everything brand new. We're also just stealing a design from the toy line of Batman and Robin. But
Schumacher, telling you, one of the biggest influences on Batman that nobody talks about.
But yeah, it's just random things they're just saying, like, yeah, it was so on the edge of their seat, like flying by the seat of the pants, kind of making of toys, that he's like, I had concept art for the toy of Mr. Freeze where it was Patrick Stewart, because I was told it was going to be Patrick Stewart, and then we're told like a week later, no, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's like, oh, you're in the production now for this freaking oh, for God's sake. So,
that toy I bought you for your birthday kind of looks like Arnie.
Oh, that one looks like that's a good rendition of Arnie, I think. The other ones have like goggles and stuff on. I think it could be anybody getting some of them. But
I was just interested in her like mentioning a Poison Ivy action figure at all, given how much controversy there sometimes is about sort of the inclusion of female characters within action figure lines. And I didn't really have a sophisticated thought about that, but it just made me think about that. And I was wondering whether, I was assuming they probably did a Poison Ivy figure, but I mean, as I'm sure you guys are aware, the stuff of the controversy of like, they never have Princess Leia figures with like some of the Star Wars collections and stuff, and there was controversy about them not doing Black Widow figures for various Avengers lines and stuff, or at least not making them as available.
Well,
and so that's got a whole context too.
Was it The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi where the initial run of figures didn't have Rey? The main character.
Yeah.
That's insane to me. And, I mean, now, I'm a non-binary person, but as a kid, I never questioned it. Like, I had my Turtles figures. I wanted April O'Neil alongside those Turtles. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
I think even that was Rebecca Hall said that when in Iron Man 3, where she was like, I signed on to this film, I was the villain. But they said that little boys won't buy action figures of girls.
That's crazy.
So they changed it to be Guy Pearce, that he was the villain in the end. And she was like, the reason that you're looking at me going, why is acclaimed actress Rebecca Hall in this nothing part in Iron Man 3? It's because originally it wasn't a nothing part until they went like, nope, toys won't sell. So there you go.
Well, there's always those, I mean, all of those presumptions are so weird because even the idea of action figures, they're modeled after dolls. They're modeled after a toy that was marketed to girls. And so the idea that these things are dramatically different is silly on a fundamental level. Definitely. And then sort of the anxiety that we have about, we have to educate children into being the right gender identity and everything. That's always so gross, like surrounding the marketing of toys. And it's not good.
Yeah,
it's awful. It's awful because you know what? Let your kids play with what they want to play with.
Obviously, that should be easy. That should be an obvious thing to do.
Yes. I would happily play with my wrestling figures, and then my sister would call me down, and I would go and I had to be Ken when we played Barbie and Ken.
Aw.
But hey, nothing wrong with Ken, voiced by Michael Keaton in Toy Story. So it's the best people play Ken.
Nobody wants to be Ken, though. You want to be Barbie. Barbie's cooler.
Depends what you do with Ken. You can bring this character to life, John.
Yes, I mean, I played with Barbies a little. I was big into the My Little Ponies when I was a kid, and I had some Barbies, but usually I would just play with those. I went over to another girl's house who had Barbies, and a couple of them had a Ken, and we would just never even play with him because I mean, it's like, why would I even make him involved? And I had one of those My Little Ponies that was like the boy pony too, and I never played with that one either. It's like, no, I'm perfectly happy in this feminine space. I don't really need his presence here. And
I get it totally.
Although here's a question: this phrase "I'm a lover, not a fighter." When you guys hear that, who do you immediately associate it with? Or do you associate it with anybody?
No, I don't. I've heard it a million times, but I've never thought who originated it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that too now, and I'm like drawing a blank.
The thing is, I always associate it very clearly with Michael Jackson. Because it's in The Girl Is Mine. He says to Paul McCartney at one point, like, I'm a lover, not a fighter. And for years, I assumed that was like a Michael Jackson phrase.
But we're not allowed to mention Michael Jackson anymore.
Well, so the thing is, we've had to mention Michael Jackson throughout the show because, of course, he has Batman affiliations and that was supposed to do half the soundtrack to the 89 movie with Prince. Didn't work out. And then, of course, he lobbied hard for the role of the Riddler in Batman Forever until Joel Schumacher had to be like, no, man, that ain't going to happen.
Hey, that he was lobbying hard for a lot of movie roles then. He wanted to be Jar Jar.
Yeah. But because I was thinking now, it's like, oh, is this like friggin' always the bridesmaid Michael Jackson here? It's like, no, it never gets even they're quoting him in friggin' Batman. He's still not in the movie. But then found out, apparently, not only is it not a phrase that originates with him, apparently the Kinks did a song in 1964.
I was looking it up and I was like, oh, it's a Kinks song. That's interesting.
I love the Kinks and I've never thought about this.
Yeah, because the Kinks would be appropriate for this week of minutes as well.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's not even an original of theirs. It's like, oh, people said like, oh, that song was going around. No one knows where it comes from. But it was going around before them. And they're like, oh, that I'm a lover, not a fighter is a thing. Like, it's like an old blues line or something. It goes way, way back. And then people even going, it goes back to like the Iliad and things like that. And like, okay, well, maybe. So
I'm
apparently,
looking at the lyrics to the Kinks song, and it definitely includes gender play. But sometimes I think, baby, I've got rabid blood in me because I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Oh, okay. That's very different for the time. I like that.
Well,
I am a big Kinks fan, though, so I'm biased there somewhat.
Oh, the Kinks are amazing. No shame in being a Kinks fan, my goodness.
Well, a friend of mine, Rachel, met Ray Davies one time, but
Whoa.
but didn't know who he was.
What?
She sat and spoke to him for like an hour. Like one time they're at a hotel, and she just sort of like was chatting to this little old man. And she's like, yeah, he seemed like really sad and stuff. He was just like, it's really. And then afterwards, people were like,
shy, you know.
But afterwards, someone was like, you know who that was? He's like, no, some guy. His name is Ray. And she's like, that was the guy from the Kinks. Like,
one of the biggest of all time.
Yeah, but anyway, speaking of lovable old men. So actually, before we move on, we're gonna go back out to the room, but this has to be the most overt reference this movie's gonna make to the classic scenario in Nightfall, wherein Batman gets his back broken by Bane. Because Bane comes, grabs him, lifts him up, kind of strains his back against the stairs. Of course, the classic shot of Bane would be literally lifting Batman over his head, slamming him down over his knee. But that's so difficult to pull off in any scenario. Even Tom Hardy, when he did it in 2012, it just had to be like a quick little over the knee kind of thing.
Hey, speak to wrestlers. That is a wrestling move.
A backbreaker.
A wrestler, right, friggin'? Although, I did also hear recently that Jeep Swenson, of course, playing Bane here, was so buff that he couldn't get a t-shirt on. Like, he couldn't lift his hands over his head. So that might be what I have to do it this way. It's like the guy literally can't lift anything over his head. He has to just... The closest we're going to get is, like, him straining his back against
He's too big.
Yeah.
Well, and of course,
That can happen.
it's the finishing move of, or it used to be, which is not wrestling anymore. It used to be the finishing move of Nikki Bella, except that she called it the rack attack, of course.
The rack attack.
Yeah.
Yes, I loved that. She has a few versions of the rack attack, actually, because she originally, if I remember, did the torture rack, which was a move by Lex Luger. And she would do that, but then fall onto her knees and like break someone's back. But that destroyed her neck.
Yeah.
To the point where she's now retired because of it. So she had to change the move because I can't keep doing this. I'm going to be crippled.
Yeah. It's like ironic. The move that crippled Batman.
yeah. The rack attack.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
Everything is connected, and everything comes back to wrestling.
Although now I'm curious because like we've had followers who have these Batman movies have awakened things in them. Most particularly the Chase Meridian feeling up Batman's pecs.
Yeah, there's a listener who's very into that.
Yeah, in Batman Forever. Then Poison Ivy's hand coming out of the pink gorilla outfit near the nipple also seemed to set off that same listener.
Yeah,
and now we got it here again. We've got Ivy's gloved hands all over Batman's pecs here. I'm wondering if we're going to get, if this were to be the screenshot of this episode, could we dependably expect messages from that same listener?
Yes. And you know what? If you're listening right now, no shame. Do it. Message us.
Yeah.
Like, it's cool. It's all good. We support it. We like it. It's fine.
Yeah. That's
Well, I hope that they know the reference to the gorilla scene, which is like an old Marlene Dietrich movie with Cary Grant.
Yeah.
It's the hot voodoo sequence from Blonde Venus. Yeah, we did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great. It's one of those things like, oh, great sequence. Brackets, also very racist. But beyond that, it's
ignore the racist bit. It's fine. It's fine.
Well, I have it on the still of her touching him right now, and I forgot that her gloves have red fingernail paint on them.
Yeah.
Now I've got gloves like this.
Detail.
I've got gloves like this for drag purposes, but you glue fake nails to the glove.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Whereas she has just painted the ends of the glove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think someone suggested it was supposed to evoke more of like a flower kind of look to have the green within the red at the ends and stuff. But
makes sense. Yeah, but still, I would.
I wish we had the
glue
proper
some
nails on it now. It would look better. I would like that a lot.
It would look cooler, and if we're going this route, I mean, she could run the nails down Batman.
Mm-hmm.
That's always
a lot
central.
of missed opportunities here. Yeah.
Could have nails like thorns, maybe.
There you go. Yeah.
And then maybe they're like, it's a bit too Catwoman. We can't, like, we're already gone so far with it. We can't go any further.
That genuinely might be the thought process. Yeah.
Although, again, this line though, like, try not to make a mess when you die, also feels like we'll write a better line later. And then like, I forgot. Oh, I guess this is what we're shooting. Sorry. It's like old Joel ahead of schedule and under budget Schumacher. That's what he's known for.
We do though see that the cops who are slowly dying, they spring to life, essentially, because Gordon gets his big heroic moment now, finally.
Yeah.
Finally, Gordon does something. He crawls to the off switch, and turns off that lung-freezing chemical. Oh, my lungs. He saves the day. And the police immediately spring to life. No ill effects. Incredible.
Is the most... the most effective he's been since that very moment of like, God damn it, we had him, like in the first movie. That was the last sign of Gordon's dignity. But now here he is back. 8 years later, he's finally revived it.
I was genuinely moved. I was like, oh my God, Gordon is finally doing something.
Oh, I love just right after that, like the scene of like the little part where Freeze is going up the spiral staircase. Just something so funny about him going up the spiral staircase. It's so many steps, and he's so awkward in that costume, and he's just
clunking around.
Really focused on him going all the way up, like he's booking it up there in his suit, and that made me happy.
And I love his little utterance as he his prize is within his grasp, and he's just like, yes.
He's a real yes man, this Mr. Freeze. Remember he's in Arkham looking up He's like, yes, to himself as well.
Ah.
He just try to keep positive. He's got to accentuate the positive. That's Mr. Freeze's attitude.
You know what? When you're down, listeners, you just got to believe.
Yeah. We'll say, too, though, in that Gordon's finally, like, elderly old cop approaching retirement and him being the one to step in to save the day. Nice little thing there. Should say, too, Pat Hingle, absolute workhorse of an actor. Between Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, this guy was in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects. 7 projects from 95 to 97. He was in a biopic of Harry S. Truman, starring Gary Sinise. He was in an episode of Wings, playing a character called Jack Hackett, which is, of course, Father Jack Hackett from Father Ted.
Father Ted, I was thinking that, yeah.
It's a complete coincidence, but apparently he played Jack Hackett.
Drink.
He was in an episode of American Gothic. He was in something called Bastard Out of Carolina, which was directed by Angelica Houston, of course, previous partner of Jack Nicholson. And he is in Larger Than Life, of course, Bill Murray. The Member of the Wedding, and then he was in the atrocious TV remake of The Shining.
Wait, is this the one Stephen King did himself?
Yeah, Mick Garris and Stephen King, but with Steven Weber, who of course was also in Wings, with Tim Daly, who of course voice of Animated Superman again.
Well, Stephen King insists to this day it's better.
Yeah, but it's Stephen King is the guy who made Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah, but he made Maximum Overdrive on a hell of a lot of cocaine.
Yeah,
so you know.
I've been really intrigued recently because I watched Midnight Mass last week, which of course Mike Flanagan, who of course did Dr. Sleep.
Oh yeah, I saw this came up on. Was it on Netflix?
It's actually a very good show, but it's so Stephen King-like because he's actively friends with Stephen King, in that it's just like this huge swaths of dialogue where people, you can imagine that being a Stephen King book where it's just like paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff that people always complain about with Stephen King, where he just writes too much into stuff. Yeah. And I remember Pat Hingle's bit in the TV remake of The Shining is he's explaining the boiler to Jack Torrance. And it goes on for about 10 minutes of him going, so you need to put this over here to put that there.
Yeah, that works on the page.
It's all just setting up to be like, this boiler is going to blow up at the end. That's going to be, so you have to remember the boiler? Okay. It's like, the reason Stanley Kubrick probably cut that out, Steve, it's because as a thing to watch, it ain't that great, man.
Yeah. You can read that kind of stuff. But that's why Lord of the Rings works so well, because, most of the book is describing the terrain. But the movie doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Because we can see the terrain. So it's fine. I can see the mountain that he spent 2 pages describing in the book. It's okay.
But yeah. So again, just to be fair, Pat Hingle doesn't get much to do in this movie, but gets this little moment.
He gets his heroic moment.
And plus, guy was friggin' working. Like, always working, this guy. It's all his old actors, too. Michael Gough, just like saying in between movies he's off and friggin' doing on a frozen stage in London, just doing plays and stuff, because that's just, these guys just lived to act. So,
Why
well,
not?
and both
Why
of them,
not
too,
do
they're
it?
bringing their all to these roles. I mean, bringing so much gravitas to Alfred, and he's just like, I believe in him, like crawling across the room here to try to find that switch. Like, he's really acting. He's not phoning it in. I admire that.
It's the best he's done in like 4 movies.
I will say there are some missed opportunities though in this set, I think, because him crawling over to get this, like, that's fair enough. That's man of Pat Hingle's age. That's what he can do. But like, they could have had all the other guys trying to do it and like slipping around on the floor and create like a real sense of tension where like he literally can't walk anymore because everything's frozen and stuff.
Yeah.
Even in like, the fights with Bane and things like that. If you're going for the 60s silliness, like Batman fell on a bag of sprinkles, why isn't he like picking up a handful of ice cream sprinkles and throwing them in Bane's face to see what happens? Like, and trying to bust a cone over his head or something. Like, just, using raspberry sauce and it looks like blood or something like that. Like, that's a million things you could be doing here in this ice cream factory. But they kind of play it like relatively straight, which is surprising because it's just like, well, this is the movie that's just like letting go and like, nothing's too silly for them. Except apparently, I don't know if they just didn't think of it. If it was a budgetary thing, what happened there? But
well, that's like, again, where I don't love this movie as much as I want to, because it's not sort of going far enough in one direction or another. It's caught between influences and caught between obligations of what it's expected to be. So part of me is just amazed that they could make something this camp, because given where the Batman franchise was like before this and where it went after this, it's amazing that this even exists. And I love it for that, because it is so camp and it is so weird. And I love that spiritually. But it's just not able to go as far as you would actually want it to go. And that's why when I think of that opening scene with them doing the hockey and the ice place and everything, and he's like, surfing down the dinosaur and everything, that is amazing. That's just going full on cartoon. And then you see here, they still have the sets and everything, but they're abandoning some of that, dialing the camp up to 11. And I think it's just disappointing. I think that's why when I watch it, it seems long, because you're excited at that opening, and then by the end of it, you're sort of like, it's just the appearance of camp, and it's not really leaning into it the way I would want it to.
Yeah, I get that. Why not just double down on it?
I think even in camp,
do camp.
Like in the novelization, they have a bit where Batman falls into a giant whisking machine, which feels very very Silver Age kind of thing. Like I know, like they did. Back in the original script from like 1983, the first movie, the climax took place on a giant typewriter. Like it seems like this is the kind of thing. Like, if you're going to do it, do it. Like go and have it be like. Yeah. I guess they kind of get into a little, in a week's time when Robin goes into the goop and stuff. But even that's like, it's not enough. There should be like friggin' cherries falling around here, and like you should be really playing up the fact that like they're having a fight in an ice cream factory. But
you can just see like all the behind the scenes battles and stuff going on though, because budget problems and too many cooks in the kitchen and everything. I mean, that's what makes this movie interesting, but it can obviously be what makes it frustrating as well, and is presumably the reason why a huge part of why so many people hate it.
Yeah, I do also have a It just reminded me as well that it all talks about Mr. Freeze's lair. It's like there's a 3-year-old turning 4 downstairs who keeps talking about a Mr. Freeze action play set he's seen on some YouTube video. So I'm like, that's right. I gotta make sure to keep an eye out for that thing, because he's very, very excited about it. So
don't let the kid get the Mr. Freeze toy I gave you.
I think he was asking about it. He's up in the room looking at it. Was like, I'm just like, you can't take that one out of the box. That's been in the box since '97. We can't take it out now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm someone who opens toys, but if I'm buying you a toy from the 90s, you better keep that.
Oh, yeah. I'm a guy. It's like, I'll take it out of the package because I want to see the whole thing. So, but yeah, if it's from 97, you can't just go like, well, the seal's torn.
Nah, you know what? I'm saying that as a joke. If you want to open it, open it.
Oh, I know. Like, it's got a viewing window. I'm happy enough with that. So.
You should do a poll. You should do a poll for your listeners of to open or not to open.
Oh my God, I'm actually genuinely tempted to do that, and then we can live stream Niall opening it.
But because though, Anna, speaking there about Batman and Robin's reputation, because it is so reviled, or was for a long time, we are asking the guests about what they think the worst film they've ever seen is. Like, do you know what you would consider to be the worst film you've ever seen?
I'm someone who watches bad movies on purpose to kind of do the Mystery Science Theater 3000 thing and make fun of them. So it's really hard for me to pick something.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe I'd keep it within the Batman franchise that I really did not. I've only watched it once in theaters, but like the Dark Knight Rises movie, I really didn't like it.
I've still only watched that the once in the cinema with Niall, I believe, and I didn't like it.
Oh, it's really appropriate that you're here for because
I know, because I really liked Dark Knight Returns. Like, and I remember both of my experiences of like being in the movie theater for those ones. Like, the he doesn't save her like part in Dark Knight Returns. Like, I was like, this is a brilliant like unexpected move, and like the Heath Ledger Joker was amazing. I was blown away by that movie. I thought it was great, and I'm not even really like, if I like Batman, I like camp Batman, so it's not really my favorite type of Batman, but I still thought it was a great movie. And then there was this point like midway through Dark Knight Rises, I think maybe it was the point where like they were forcing people out onto the ice and just like everybody was just dying by falling through the ice, and I was like, this is so silly, but pretending it's super serious, and that bothered me so much.
I get that,
there were so many things in that movie that were so silly, but they just wanted me to think it was like just the weight of like the desaturated color palette, and like the dialogue was so weighty, and I was supposed to take it so seriously, and yet it was so silly, and I just was like exploding with frustration in the movie theater. Like the movie wanted to be so ponderous and like serious, and there was just something about that bothered me. And I want to be clear, I don't think it's the worst movie I've ever seen. I've seen far, far, far worse movies. I was just kind of trying to think of something that was sort of related to this that I didn't enjoy. So again, I'm sure you have many listeners that are a big fan of that movie, so please don't come at me. It's a very subjective opinion.
I found to be there's a lot of people have no time for Dark Knight Rises, so I think you actually might be like pretty safe. Like I think you'd be more in danger if you went after like the Zack Snyder movies or something, because they've got the fans. But Rises is one where people seem to be very like, oh yeah, that dropped the ball, that whole trilogy. But I do defend it. I've got beef with it, but I've also got like, yeah, it did a lot for me as well. So
that's completely fair. Again, I'm not saying it's the worst movie I've seen, but it was not a movie that I recalled enjoying.
But we all are also asking guests though, if they have a film that, much like Batman and Robin is to some people, a film that is regarded as being bad that you personally love.
This was a really hard one for me too, because a lot of my favorite movies are kind of cult movies, but cult movies are beloved in a certain sense, even though they weren't necessarily beloved upon first airing. But I tried to come up with something good. So I came up with the 2010 A-Team film. Which was not well reviewed. I don't know that I would say that it was reviled, certainly just not well reviewed, and is largely just forgotten now. But I'm a big fan of the original A-Team, and I'm a distant relative of George Peppard.
I was about to make a George Peppard joke, and I was like, oh my god, it's actually happening.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I am related to him, but like, 3 times removed.
But I love it when a connection comes together.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I would stand behind that A-Team movie as being enjoyable, to the extent that some of the plot of the original show they didn't incorporate. Like, they depoliticized it in a lot of ways, because in the original show they're kind of helping small businesses against like large scale capitalists, and they took away that in the movie and made it more of like a secret agent operation. So that's unfortunate. But in terms of capturing the spirit of it, sort of the character dynamics, the goofiness, the over the top action, because when I was looking up reviews of it, kind of thinking, is this what I want to choose? And a lot of the reviews sort of confirmed my feeling about it, because they were like, this movie is just, it makes no sense. Like the action is just empty. It's cartoonish. And I was like, yeah, those are all the reasons the A-Team is great. And that was why I enjoyed that movie. That's the one I'm gonna
okay, you've sold me on it. I will admit I have never seen the film.
Starring Raj Al Ghul himself, Liam Neeson.
That's the only thing I know about it. Who plays B.A. Baracus?
I can't remember who was B.
Like, I think it's like an athlete guy that's sort of, he hasn't done a lot of other movies and sort of up and coming at that time. They sort of wanted, I think, kind of an unknown for that role, because they knew nobody could kind of replace Mr. T. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The only way to pull it off, to me, to go back to something I've brought up like 3 or 4 times, get a wrestler. Mr. T was basically a goddamn wrestler. He was a living wrestling character.
Oh, apparently they did. I looked him up as Quentin Jackson, who is a American mixed martial artist, actor, and former professional wrestler. So there you go.
I don't know him. Okay, maybe he dabbled. Yeah, maybe he's more MMA. Okay.
Yeah. It also features in Vigilante Diaries and The Midnight Meat Train.
Midnight Meat Train. Is that with Vinnie Jones?
It is, yeah. It's like he's all high caliber stuff.
I remember that vividly, because when that was coming out, I was staying at former guest of the show, Kit Flemons. I was staying at his house, and he had an issue of Bizarre magazine promoting the upcoming Vinnie Jones classic Midnight Meat Train.
The trauma of staying there has imprinted this Midnight Meat Train cover onto your psyche.
I will never forget it.
Oh, but yeah, I think we're at the end of the minute. Anna, do you have any parting words for minute 78 or Batman and Robin in general?
Oh goodness, that's a huge obligation. Okay, I will say that reviewing the film after so many years, and I think we mentioned in a previous episode, I had not seen this in at least 20 years. I've watched clips of it from time to time. I have read academic essays, quite a few of them, about this film, but I have not rewatched the entire film, like probably since shortly after it was released.
Whoa.
I know. So revisiting it after all this time was definitely interesting. I felt kind of overwhelmed. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but at the same time was frustrated by the end of it. Just it felt long, and for all the reasons that we've already talked about, there were things that frustrated me about it. But reviewing it minute by minute, it's more enjoyable than watching it all at once, which makes your podcast really brilliant, because I think when you just have a small dose of this movie, you're like, that's great. But when you have 2 hours of this movie, it's like eating too much ice cream. It's like too much of a good thing, and you feel a little bit kind of nauseous at the end of it. That's my Batman and Robin take.
That's a good on theme metaphor to go out on to, considering the setting of the past few minutes. So.
Hell yes, hell yes. So we will head off now, once more into the dark, dark night. Anna, one more time, would you like to tell people where you can be found online?
Certainly. You can find me on Twitter just under my name, Peppard_Anna. You can check out my book, Supersex, Sexuality, Fantasy, and the Superhero, which includes discussion of Batman comics and Batman porn parodies of the both heterosexual and non-heterosexual variety. Lots of just fun discussions of Batman in that book. And you can also check out my 2 podcasts. One is 3 Panel Contrast, which is a monthly discussion of comics classics with me. They're comics academics. Yes, there are academics who study comics as their main thing. I know, it blows my mind too. And I have another podcast called the Oh Gosh, Oh Golly, Oh Wow podcast, which is a weekly issue by issue read through of the classic Marvel comic series Excalibur, which is a X-Men franchise title that is set in the UK, starring Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde and Phoenix and Captain Britain and his lovely shape-shifting girlfriend Megan.
Anything set over here obviously has to be the best.
Obviously.
But do speak to us as usual. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that. Just look up Batminute. And go to thebatminute.com if you want our website. So check all of that out. And do see us again on Monday, because we'll be back with more Bat Minute and Robin.
Next time, Double Dangerous Liaisons. The battle with Bane sees a barrage of blows that nearly break the Batman's neck. Witch of Wisteria winds in a boy wonder for a potentially poisonous peck, but as the Baroness of Blight licks her lips to deliver a long kiss goodnight, can the sinister smooch be intercepted by a damaged but dutiful Dark Knight? There's more deadly debauchery on Monday, Batmites. Same Bat Pod, different Bat Minute.
We'll be back.